What's up guys, Skip your After Contests here. In today's video, we're going to be going over the STRELA-P from Modern Warfare 2, or as it's known in real life, the Carl Gustaf 8.4cm recoilless rifle. That's right, this isn't technically a rocket launcher, it's actually a recoilless rifle, which kind of explains why there's really no lead time when you actually fire this thing in-game. I mean, in-game it's still a little bit extreme versus how it would be in real life, but I mean, it is kind of a little bit of a neat feature because in general, recoilless rifles do fire a little bit faster than standard rocket launchers. But what is exactly a recoilless rifle? That's something I feel like we should answer before we go into what the Carl Gustaf actually is. So a recoilless rifle and a rocket launcher, the main difference between the two is in a recoilless rifle, the propellant is actually located behind the warhead or rocket. Whereas in your standard rocket launcher, the propellant is located, well, inside the warhead. This provides the recoilless rifles a good benefit of being able to actually have much larger payloads because they don't have to share space with the propellant, and it also allows them at times to have a much faster velocity because, again, you're not carrying that propellant with the actual warhead. And that really is the main difference between the recoilless rifles and the rocket launchers. Now, because of that main difference, there also is some other minor differences, but we'll get into those as we talk about the Carl Gustaf itself. So to start off with the Carl Gustaf itself, I feel like we should talk about its actual origin. The development of the initial model started in 1946. There was plenty of other recoilless rifle designs being, made and tested during that time. It was kind of one of the popular techs of the day. Actually, fun fact, the Panzerfaust that you commonly see in a lot of World War II games, that's actually considered a recoilless rifle. A little funny enough, but plenty of countries had them. The U.S. had them, all that. Recoilless rifles were pretty popular. And in fact, this actually wasn't the first Carl Gustaf. It was the first Carl Gustaf to be using an 84mm or 8.4cm cartridge, but they actually before that had the 20mm recoilless rifle. However, with the advent of very tough tank armor and stuff like that, they realized they really needed to go to a much larger warhead, which in 1948 they did, with the weapon receiving the official designation 8.4cm Granatgewehr M48. Now again, this is the first model, and the Carl Gustaf would actually have multiple models. The one featured specifically in this game is actually the M4 variant, which was developed in 2014. A lot of the differences between this one and the earlier models, which actually is a common thing you would see with other models and their predecessors, is main thing is it's a little bit lighter weight, and then of course on this one specifically they also have just better optic mounts and everything else. For the most part, the standard issue, well, not optic but sight, would just be iron sights. Maybe or very likely you would have something to make them night sights, but yeah, for the most part iron sights, but we live in the modern age, and of course they're going to be mounted optics, and the Swedish actually mount their own little aim point system. That's what they tend to mount on these. Now, I had mentioned before that due to the main difference between the recoilless rifles and launchers being that whole propellant thing, there's also some other minor differences that come as a result of that. And one big difference with the recoilless rifles versus the launchers is recoilless rifles tend to be incredibly violent when they're being shot. Now, as the name implies, they are, still recoilless, so the Carl Gustaf is not, kicking super hard. I mean, it's not totally recoilless, but the main little issue with it is it does create an incredible shockwave, and in fact, in training, the gunner's only allowed to fire 6 shots a day, or people that will be shooting it. And when they actually do fire it, rather than in an actual combat zone where you would have your assistant gunner, loader, following behind you to load with you, during training, that's not entirely needed, so they have them sit back to the side because, well, as mentioned, this thing has a massive just shockwave it creates, and like I had mentioned, only 6 rounds a day are allowed to be fired, so they don't want to cause shockwave injuries. And this also goes into another piece that makes the recoilless rifles in particular extra violent, is the massive backblast they create. Now, rocket launchers, of course, will create a backblast. I mean, there's no way to avoid that, but recoilless rifles make the backblast from a standard launcher look like a little smoke bomb going off. Now, with the Carl Gustaf in particular, it's up to about 75 meters, where it's actually hazardous to be behind. From what I'm reading, it says dangerous to 30 meters. I don't, dangerous and hazardous mean the same thing, but I'm gonna assume that it's extra dangerous at that 30-meter mark. Either way, though, you can see in the pictures, the backblast is utterly insane, and it's up to the, you know, loader and stuff as they're, you know, firing this thing to make sure that there is nothing in that backblast area, or you're not pretty much parked up against a wall, because obviously, if you're parked up against a back wall with this backblast going off, it's not going to be too fun. And going off into another weird little thing that I found out with the Carl Gustaf, it's actually rifle. So where typically a lot of launchers are just going to be, you know, smoothbore, plenty of recoilless rifles actually take the rifling route, and rather than having, you know, fin-stabilized projectiles, they rely on the rifling, which I just think that's kind of neat. I mean, one thing that is pretty neat, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it yet, is these are actually considered man-portable artillery pieces, which does kind of make sense when you look at how the projectile is. Speaking of which, one of the most important things with launchers, and I know I keep saying launcher even though it's technically a recoilless rifle, just realize it's a recoilless rifle and I'm going to say the easiest word. But anyways, one of the most important things with launchers is having a wide variety of munitions present. Because, you know, sometimes you gotta fight a tank, other times you gotta take out a bunker with, you know, enemy personnel in them. So the Carl Gustaf, like many other launchers, recoilless rifles, all that, has a wide variety of munitions, and I'm not going to be naming off every single one, but just know that if you ever get issued a Carl Gustaf, this is what you got available to you. And one of these rounds will most certainly get the job done. Now, going into the next topic, this topic has always been quite fun for this whole Guns in Real Life series, mainly because a lot of these guns a lot of guns in this game aren't actually used in the military, they're used by the civilian market. Now, there really aren't any civilians that own any type of Carl Gustaf 8.4 centimeters. I mean, there actually might be people that own some of the very older model Carl Gustavs. I really doubt it, and if they do, good luck getting the rockets. But when it comes to the actual users of this weapon, of course, it's military, and this weapon is very, very well received, and I guess it sort of makes sense when you consider that Sweden has just been continually developing the platform since 1948 with all these various models they have. This weapon also is not limited to Sweden. It's been exported to various other countries. The US in particular has had it exported to them, and then they would have it modified a little bit to suit whatever needs they wanted. But yeah, for the most part, the Carl Gustaf is very, very well received. Or at least as well received as recoilless rifles tend to be. Recoilless rifles have always been a very weird system in general, because at times they will be heavily looked into, heavily developed, produced, and all that, and then some other weird thing will come out and they'll be pushed to the side. Recently with recoilless rifles, or not even really recently, but it's been quite a while, but one of the main reasons that recoilless rifles weren't as adopted heavily was guided rockets. Of course, you know, much like the very definition of a recoilless rifle and a rocket launcher itself, it gets a little bit muddied too when it comes to the pros and cons between recoilless rifles and, say, guided rockets. Now, guided rockets are still a little bit more preferred, but the Carl Gustaf and recoilless rifles in general do have some benefits over the guided rockets. One main thing is cost, and especially cost per round. So let's compare this to the very popular at the moment Javelin. The Javelin's standard rocket comes in at around $197,000, whereas the Carl Gustaf, the price per rockets vary from $500 to $3,000. Obviously, it is way easier to feed these things, and in fact, the weapon itself is way cheaper. I mean, $197,000 per rocket versus $20,000 to make just an actual Carl Gustaf. And that is the one big pro that the recoilless rifles in general have over the guided rockets. Now, as I mentioned, you know, the waters get muddied a little bit, but in general, recoilless rifles are way cheaper to produce and kinda sorta do pretty much the same job as the guided missiles, but again, the waters get very muddied when it comes to comparing the pros and cons between both of the weapon systems. Though I will say, maybe it would have been better to send Ukraine a bunch of these things, because if they're just gonna let their javelins get captured, at least these aren't $197,000. I guess the javelins are in better hands now. But anyways, I think that is gonna do it for this short little video on the STRELA-P from Modern Warfare 2. Or, as it's known in real life, the Carl Gustaf 8.4cm recoilless rifle. I hope you all enjoyed the video as much as I personally enjoyed making it. I actually wanted to make this one before the 4570. I'll admit, my knowledge on launchers and stuff of this nature is not as good as small firearms, but, you know, the recoilless rifles, the little bit I do know about them, I always thought that they were super cool. I remember actually when I was using that one, and I think it was one of the old Medal of Honors. I know that was the first recoilless rifle I ever learned about, and yeah, they are very, very neat weapons platforms. So anyways, make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, and I will see y'all next time.